I'm joined by Rob Nicoll, co-founder and CMO of Chipsboard. Thank you so much for joining me, Rob.
No worries, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be able to talk about some sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always excited to talk about some sustainability. So the way I like to start is just by asking kind of a broad question about what problem do you and the team at Chipsboard solve?
So at Chipsboard, we solve the problem and sort of the quite broad problem of plastic pollution and resources going to waste.
Mm-hmm.
So we produce a range, so we call ourselves material innovators. So we don't say that we have one product as of now, but we explore to create materials that can replace current plastics. So we have some bioplastics that we're working on, and these are made using. We don't like using the word waste, but we say byproduct from food industry. So things that might otherwise go to waste.
Yeah,
we can use these to create a product that replaces petrochemical plastics while giving value and use to an otherwise useless feedstock.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was speaking with someone else who does something similar. Except they take, as you call it, byproduct and turn it into basically yarn to make clothing out of. Well, they also prefer not to call it waste. They see it as an unused resource or a mismanaged resource, basically. And it's amazing. So essentially what you're doing is replacing, like you said, petrochemical, so plastic made of like the standard plastic made of oil.
Yeah.
And by doing that, what's the, are you more focused on the reducing the waste side, or is it more about making it, like so that it degrades or is compostable, or is it kind of a combination of the two?
It's definitely a combination of the two. So to sort of take you back to sort of how the company was sort of established, myself and my co-founder Rowan, we both studied design. We still consider ourselves designers, and we did a lot of 3D building, 3D design, and actually it became increasingly aware to the both of us that through our design practice, we were using huge quantities of material, not just to create the products themselves, but the offcuts and the trims and everything we weren't using to create the products. So actually the company came from this desire to explore other material options and really evolved from a problem. We always say that we're problem solvers at Chipsboard. So most directions that we take stem from trying to find another solution to a problem that we're having.
Absolutely. And 3D printing is so cool. Are you able to 3D print with the plastic that you make?
There's lots of future potential with the plastics that we make. So the plastic that we create is a thermoplastic. So initially it'll be in pellet form. So it's ideal for injection molding, which I always say we're really passionate about injection molding because actually it's quite a sustainable way of producing, because you don't have any offcuts. You only use the amount of plastic that you need to create that part.
I see. So just so I can understand, just take a step back. So the offcuts, that happens if you have like a sheet of plastic or something and you have to basically cut it out to make a shape.
Exactly. But with injection molding, you get the exact amount of material that you need. You shove it into a mold, and there's often sprues. So the best way to see it is an airfix kit. So there's often the sprues and the connections that hold the part together. But actually, a lot of the time, they can be cut up, reground within the same facility. So it's quite a circular, actually, manufacturing process in itself.
So all of this is what's called bioplastics, right? That means that it's made from actual biological stuff.
Yes.
So I mean, what is it made from?
So we started with potato waste, and we still use potato waste.
Huh.
So a connection that we had very early on, and a partnership we're really proud of, is that we work with McCain. So they're one of the largest potato processors globally. I'm sure most people have a bag of chips or Smileys or an alternative product they create in their freezer somewhere. But we work with them, and we use everything they don't use to create their products, and we can create materials from that. So we're not using anything that has a purpose go into production. So actually, what we are using is truly a byproduct. It's we're not skimming some of the useful stuff from that.
Right. So it's not like you're taking food. It's not like you would take something that would would have been food and turning it into a bioplastic? You're taking the stuff that would it just have been thrown away, or where would it go?
So that's a really, really interesting question, and something that we're really excited about. So traditionally, this feedstock goes to very low grade animal feed. So it's normally used as a bulker because
Mm.
actually the nutritional value of this animal feed is extremely low.
Hmm.
Actually, what we can do is we take that byproduct, we can put it through our process, but there's also parts of that feedstock that we can't use in our process. So once we've taken what we need, we can actually continue what we don't use into the same stream. And what we don't use actually is a much more refined animal feed, which is actually better for the animals in the long run anyway. So actually, we can actually plug into a current logistics system, which is factory byproduct to animal feed. We can valorize part of that byproduct to create our materials, but then still maintain that sort of that feed. So we're not taking away actually anything from one industry or another.
That's really cool. And why potatoes specifically? I mean, that's I would have never thought to make plastic out of potatoes.
So there's a few reasons why potatoes. There is the very early reason, which was as a designer, I was doing some very strange products around potatoes, seeing what you could use them for outside of food. So making potato prints and things like that, like you would have done when you were a child.
Yeah.
Um, but actually looking into materials and alternative materials, potatoes come up a lot in literature around potato plastic. So there's a lot of children's activities and science experiments you can do around starch-based plastics that utilize potato starch. And this seemed like a fantastic starting point for myself and my co-founder Rowan, especially because Rowan at the time, throughout university, was working as a chef that had access to a lot of potato peels that were coming from his kitchen. Obviously, petrochemical plastics are phenomenal. We never say at Chips Board that we hate plastics. We just think that it's how we use plastics, which is fundamentally wrong. So single-use plastics and plastics that are really undervalued clearly need to be addressed. But if you look into plastics involved within machinery, surgical applications, as a family of materials, plastics are phenomenal. But at Chipsboard, we want to make sure that where the plastic doesn't need to have the conditions of petrochemical plastics, we can replace that to ensure that we still have the products that we need, but they are biodegradable, they're recyclable, and overall responsible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's something that I think maybe sometimes misunderstood is that plastic is it's an unbelievable material. There's so much you can do with it, and it's really sturdy. It's durable. It lasts forever, which has a good and bad side to it. It's the throwaway culture aspect of plastic. That's where the real issue is. And if you're able to somehow redesign the way people use plastic, like for those kind of things, as in like milk cartons, or I mean, everyone hates straws. So if you can find alternatives to that, that makes sense. But the actual material itself is very powerful.
So, exactly. So I know if I had to have a new heart valve put in, and the doctor said it was biodegradable plastic, I might maybe take a second look because I don't know how that'd work. But obviously, I
Yeah.
can rest assured that what they use in those applications are incredibly versatile plastics that will last forever, especially as long as I'd be around.
Yeah.
Um, but you raised a really good point around packaging as well, because what we do at Chipsport is we're not looking at packaging. So again, single use is something that we don't really want our materials to be used within, not because we don't think there is a need, because there's an overwhelming need to look at the plastic issue within single use.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't think that our material is the solution. So there are some fantastic companies making, like I mentioned earlier, starch-based plastics that are very easily biodegradable, um, or paper, or there are other things we can do when it comes to single-use materials. Where we see our materials being used are things that have a life based around trend and around the lifespan of the product being designed within it. So people that know of Chipsboard already and have seen some of the work we do may see that we've done some collaborations within fashion. So looking at spectacles and buttons. And these are really interesting because when you look at a pair of glasses, you may own them for 5 to 10 years, but then you may decide that the style is wrong, the trend is wrong, you want to get a new pair. And actually, we allow this to happen. So our materials are fantastic for products that need to be able to live a life. But when you're finished with that material, we can ensure that they are disposed of responsibly.
So in terms of the types of clients you have or are planning to have, it's all is it primarily directed at fashion, or there's a much broader application to it?
So I think we've had incredible amount of draw from fashion, and that actually comes from the amount of pressure that I think society has put on that specific industry, as historically they've been seen as really the bad person in material use and consumption. And we love the fact that we're speaking to companies and planning products with companies within the industry. However, that doesn't mean we're restricted to that. So we're also talking to people within interior design, architecture, as I mentioned, electronic consumer hardware. So there's lots of elements that we can really explore because, like I say, it's a plastic, and anything that you make out of plastic, and as long as the performance that you require matches our material, you can make with our material.
So you can recycle your own plastic.
So our plastic, it's a thermoplastic. It is recyclable, but it's recyclable at the moment with an asterisk above the name, and that's purely because governments and councils are really struggling, but they are beginning to try to understand what bioplastics are and how we can best deal with them post-use. So a lot of the time, bioplastics, if they entered the recycling stream currently, they would be seen as contaminants rather than a plastic that can be recycled.
Right.
And this is quite evident with a lot of the cups that we receive from day to day on coffee cups that say this is biodegradable.
Yeah.
Actually, those coffee cups are industrially biodegradable. So if you buried them in your garden or put them in your food waste, they wouldn't go anywhere because they require industrial conditions to degrade that material. So really, we're sort of looking for legislation and government to make up their mind about how they want to perceive bioplastics and actually invest in the infrastructure to be able to handle these bioplastics to get best use from materials that people like chipboard and our competitors are producing. We are very aware about the end of life with our product and how we can make sure that we are impacting the planet as little as possible.
What does end of life of your product, what does that statement mean exactly?
So when I talk about the end of life, it begins with a product being, or someone deciding that a product has fulfilled its use or is no longer needed to fulfill its use. So I go back to the example of a pair of glasses. Glasses, it could either be that they have broken, so I need to get a new pair and dispose of that pair, or I've decided that actually maybe the prescription's gone and there isn't a way to replace the lens, or the fact I just want a new pair of glasses because maybe it's been 5-10 years and they don't suit me anymore.
Right.
So that's the end. That's what I mean by sort of the end of life for a product. And then it goes on to how I can then best make sure that those glasses don't end up in waste. So if it's a biodegradable material or a recyclable material, which is the best stream to put that in to ensure the smallest input or effect it has on the planet.
I saw that you're aiming for Cradle to Cradle certification.
Yeah.
What is Cradle to Cradle? Because normally it's Cradle to Grave, isn't it?
Yeah. So Cradle to Grave is we see that's quite linear. So that's very start and finish. Cradle to Cradle is this understanding that a lot of people are speaking about now, which is true circular economy, which is there is never actually an end point to what we do. So once we develop the plastics from our waste stream, if they are biodegraded, they can go back into compost to then regrow crop, which can then go back into our stream, which is truly circular. Obviously, with recycling, it's less circular because less likely to get back to the beginning of that loop. But with the compostable end of life option, it means that actually it can be a complete circle without any deviations within that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that's classic circular economy. I think waste is just such an interesting place to work in, and such an interesting place, such an interesting opportunity specifically because there's always waste. Waste will never go away, and at least in our society, you almost always, companies especially, and people too, I mean, everyone needs to pay to dispose of the waste, because there's sometimes so much of it. You don't want it next to you. It's expensive and really time consuming to take it from your facility to, a tip or a landfill. And I think there's just so much opportunity for companies, especially going back to that circular economy aspect. There's so much opportunity to take that kind of endless waste stream. It's just constant, and find all these little opportunities to turn that into something else. And many times I've spoken with other companies that are using waste to create their own products. And sometimes these companies actually get paid to take that waste because it's cheaper than having a waste company actually remove it and taking it to landfill. So I actually find using waste a really exciting opportunity, and I think there should be a lot more of it.
Well, waste is fantastic, and the word itself is fantastic, and that's why it's really strange to not use it and actually use byproducts, because both are correct. So waste is this phenomenal word with that hard T at the end, which makes people really sort of consider it, and actually
Yeah.
it hits really hard, the idea of waste. Because it is something we want to talk about as a company, because fundamentally a lot of what we do use is considered a waste. However, as soon as someone finds a use for that, it can't be considered waste anymore, because it needs to be seen as a resource, as an opportunity. And actually being in this biomaterial space, especially in London, but around Europe over the last couple of years, it's incredible. It's this sense of, it's made from what, which you get
Yeah.
from not just us, but loads of people. We go to these events and we see tens and tens and tens of companies that make materials, either fabrics or non-woven yarns, or incredible things from incredible things.
Yeah.
And actually makes you really think that, is there anything that can't be utilized to create something else? And is it just industries putting up these walls and not giving access to these things that is the issue? And actually, if everyone was honest about the waste they had, someone might come along and say, hey, I can use that and I will make X from that. It's interesting to think how that might go if people are a lot more open with the amount of waste they were producing.
Yeah, I mean, there's when you put it that way, it's like if you could put on some magic glasses, going back to glasses, and kind of see any waste product or waste stream, and just see, actually, here's a potential use for that. There's a potential use for that, and like you said, basically absolutely anything that's ever created, there's almost always a byproduct to it. If you're able to turn that into something, you'd never have to use the word waste again. Everything becomes a resource. And if you can make money from a byproduct that would have otherwise just been thrown away or gone to something that's like animal feed, that's tremendous.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and it's really, and I really, really want to push the idea of being open about the waste you have, because someone would be able to use it. For example, I can't count the amount of companies that we see now, and everyone sees now, making things from ocean plastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ocean plastic has been a problem for tens of years, but because over the last, say, 5-10 years, because of Blue Planet, it's been at the front of media in terms of sustainability. All of these companies that now realize the amount of waste that is in the ocean, and they see that as an opportunity to take that and create products from it. So if a company doesn't let you know what waste streams they have or what byproducts they have that you could potentially use, no one would know if they could have a use or not. One thing that has been fantastic is McCain has been very open with the fact that it's been a problem for them for the last 50 years that they've been manufacturing, that actually finding a solution to valorize or use their their byproduct from food manufacturing is something they openly look for. So they've been a fantastic partner in terms of really addressing it as a problem and seeing our solution as exactly that, a solution.
Yeah, I think that is really important. I've never even considered about that openness of discussing what waste products you have. It seems like that's truly the first step. So what's next? I mean, are you going to be sticking with potatoes for the foreseeable future? Are you looking into other potential bio byproducts that you can turn into bioplastics?
So actually, so I can't go too much into exactly what other feedstocks we are using, but no, something we're doing at the moment is looking at other feedstocks, because it isn't just potatoes; it is other feedstocks that we can use to create these bioplastics. And actually, we may be able to use other feedstocks to improve these bioplastics along with things we're currently doing. So it's really exciting. So working with companies that are moving this otherwise seen food waste around and seeing if we can access these streams to create plastics from, it is extremely exciting for us. The amount of waste that we have, not just in the UK but globally, is a considerable amount, and especially looking at, not to slander any of our competitors, but a lot of the bioplastics that we see that, for example, the tops of coffee cups and the like, are actually made from crop that are grown to produce plastic. So while they're plastics made from plants, those plants are grown for that purpose, and we see that as a slightly confused process when there's so much actually feedstock which is seen as a waste that you could produce plastics from. Why would you grow more plants, more foodstock to create a plastic? I mean, it's a challenge. Obviously, using a waste stream is a lot more challenging than using a lovely, clean, controlled crop
Right.
that you can grow. But part of that challenge is what makes Chipsboard special and makes what we are doing special. So it's something that we truly believe and we are behind, and we're confident that some really exciting things will come from it.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're off to a really, really good start. And as we're starting to wrap up here, I'm really one question I'd love to ask, more as inspiration for me, is aside from solving this challenge and reducing plastic pollution, what do you personally do on a kind of like a day-to-day level, whether it's at home or at work, to be environmentally friendly?
Well, isn't that the million dollar question? I have this conversation constantly with people about the sense of not being able to win, because there's obviously, you might make a sustainable decision which is in another way unsustainable, or maybe it's bad for a different purpose. I think I and all of our team have really converted to things like, we don't use plastic bags. We use reusable coffee cups and reusable water bottles, which are things that everyone can do without changing really anything. You don't have to change your day-to-day habits, just to put some reusable cutlery in your bag when you go out for a day for meetings. And then it's just really down to trying to do as much research as you can before purchasing. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you're buying a pair of shoes, do you look at buying a leather pair of shoes, which may last 20, 30 years? I know there's some brands out there, which I won't say the name of, but they are known for lasting considerable lengths of time, but are made from leather. But then again, obviously, leather is often seen as a bad product. So do you go for a vegan leather, which is made from a plastic-based material, which you could argue is bad for the planet and wouldn't last as long, so you may have to buy more pairs in the time that one pair would last. So it really is a minefield, and it's just about making informed decisions day to day, which we try to do to our best abilities.
And it sounds like what you're saying is sometimes there isn't a correct choice, because yeah, like with leather versus plastic, they each come with their own carbon footprint. They each come with their own potential negative environmental impact.
Exactly, and if I can use this opportunity to sort of maybe plug what we're doing at Chipsboard, we're also always looking for people to support what we're doing. So actually, if people are seeing how they can maybe help companies doing things like what we're doing, we are always looking for investment. We're always looking for support, people to use our materials. So actually, if you're if you're a practitioner and looking to change the materials you're using, or just someone that wants to back a company like ours, we're always happy to have these conversations and see how we can move forward.
Yeah, I think that's crucially important. Absolutely, and that's a big part of why I started this podcast in the first place, is to really get stories like chipsboards out, because I think what you're doing is fantastic. And the way I like to think of you is you're a sustainability champion. You're working hard to heal the planet and move our overall, moving the needle over to environmentally beneficial. And people can support in a variety of different ways. It's not just planning ahead and like you said, bringing cutlery with you when you're going on meetings. It's also crucially investing in companies that are doing great things. It's purchasing from companies that are doing great things. And ultimately, I think consumers have a lot of power. And where people end up spending their money is where the market tends to go.
Exactly, and I'd like to add, especially sort of the events that's happened over the last couple of weeks with the sort of the coronavirus. And apologies for bringing it up because I'm sure it's everywhere. I think really, if we try and see a positive from the situation, is really what are the most important things that we need to be considering. Obviously, it has brought a lot of things to the forefront which people need to begin to consider. But I would hope that in a time like this, people would consider what is the most important thing, and hopefully sustainability doesn't actually get sort of put on a back burner due to these issues. And I actually hope that it's strengthened, because at a time like this, people are understanding how can we help the planet, help ourselves actually be better. So I think that sustainability should actually sort of come from current situation a lot stronger than it currently is, while people reflect on what's important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And there are some studies or some articles I've read actually, which are saying that basically because of the way that we're treating the planet, it's sort of unlocking these kinds of viruses and diseases that would have otherwise just been sort of self-contained within a large forest, for example. So I think it is really important to consider the environment now more than ever.
And if nothing else, that's the plot to an M. Night Shyamalan film.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a dramatic situation that we're looking at right now and seeing. So in terms of if someone wanted to support you or learn more about the work you're doing and find out any updates about next steps from Chipsboard, where can people go to actually see all of that?
So we only really have one point of call, because it's a lot easier to manage. But if you go to our website, there is you will be prompted to sign up to our mailing list, and we make people very aware that this isn't a weekly bugging you mailing list. This is the important things and the important announcements that we will announce through that. So we always urge people to sign up to that if they can and if they would like to. But if they would like to get in touch personally through our website, also there's a submissions which actually goes directly to me. A lot of people think it goes to a robot, but that'll go directly to me, and I can answer any questions that people may have, how people might be able to get involved, how they might be able to get involved with investing. And yeah, like I say, we never turn away an email. We never don't answer an email. And we just love hearing from people that are trying to make a difference and trying to help the planet in a good way.
That's awesome. And the website is chipsboard.com.
So it's www.chipsboard.com, all one word.
What is the name of the company is Chips and Board, two separate words, and the S has the square brackets around it.
Yes.
What is that?
So the name really derives from a material that we were producing before plastic. So very early on, we were producing it was just a panel material, which was close to chipboard. So that's where the name came from. It was a play on words with chipboard. So chipsboard was both chips being from potatoes,
right?
But also the when you put a square bracket around a letter, it means that letter can be both there and not there simultaneously. So it was chipboard but made from potatoes, and it was sort of just stemmed from that. But we as we've grown, we've definitely grown to love the name, and it's something that we get asked about constantly, but we don't plan on changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's a great conversation starter. And when I first saw it, I assumed for some reason, and I think it makes sense why I assumed it, that S also stands for sustainability, and you're kind of highlighting that part of it.
Yes, so we also so that when we're making a chipboard alternative, we say we put the sustainability in chipboard, and
Nice.
that was definitely a sort of a visual to be able to represent that.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to do it.
I will just point out that there isn't the square brackets around the website though. So it's,
Yes, good point.
yeah,
Yeah, just
well,
chips board. Yeah, spelled the way it sounds with no special punctuation there. Just chipsboard.com. Well, cool, Rob. Thank you very much for your time. I think the work you're doing is fascinating, and it sounds like you're off to an amazing start. I can't wait to see where this takes you, and to see your products in a variety of use cases all over the world, hopefully.
no, thank you for having me. I think platforms like this are hugely important, and I'm honoured to be invited to actually be able to speak on it. So
Oh,
thank you
that's
for having
awesome. Well, thank you very much for the kind words. Great, and yeah, take care, and yeah, stay healthy with everything that's floating around right now.
me. And you, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star rating. And also, please subscribe, whether on your podcast app or on YouTube. And that way you can be the first to know about new episodes. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.